Good morning, friends. Thank you so much for welcoming me to Greece. Molly, thank you so much for that fun introduction. I do actually know astronauts, so that's kind of funny. The one that I am the biggest fan of is a woman astronaut who is also the CEO of X Prize. And one night I got to have dinner sitting next to her accidentally. And it was like the whole dinner I was sitting there like, be cool, be cool, be cool, don't be a dork. But it was the most amazing thing being surrounded by people like that. And when you're part of the Singularity community, you do get to interact with people like that all the time, and it's really amazing. Today, I was thinking what I wanted to start this talk off with, and I was thinking about this morning when I was sitting on my balcony, having a cup of coffee and looking at the Acropolis. And I realized that being here in Athens for the last week, I've thought a lot about the past. But that's actually not what we're here today to do. We're here today to talk about the future together. So what we're going to be doing this morning is I'm going to be introducing you to a way of thinking about the future that I personally find very useful. And it's the way we use this way to think at Singularity University overall. And I think this is a really important framework for you all because, I'm not that old, honestly, but it feels like things now are a lot different than when I was your age. And in fact, when you're my age, I think the world is going to be even more different. So let's take a look together at how you can be empowered, not just to think about the future, but how to make it. So first, I want to find out from you guys, how do you feel about the future? Shout some words out for me. How does thinking about the future make you feel? Excited, good. I think I heard a hopeless. Can I get some Can I get some more words? Shout them out. Now's your time to be loud. Promising, good. How many of you think you know what job you're going to have? A few, yeah, okay. I have an 8-year-old son. People ask me all the time, Tiffany, what job is your son going to have? And I'm like, I have no idea. I do know 2 things for sure. Number 1, he has to learn how to code. And girls, in particular, I cannot tell you how important it is, women, that you learn to code and you get out there and you represent. Because when all you have are men coders, all you get are men AI. Same thing with science. If you only have men scientists, all you get is male science. The more minds we have working on problems, the more diversity we have, the more power we all have. And each of you is empowered to be a part of making the future. So here's the way things used to be in the past. So for about 9,000 years of human history, there weren't so many people, right? You can see that on the y-axis here is the population of the planet. And as time went on, some pretty important technological advances happened. It's easy to think of our ancestors as primitive, but man, the world they lived in was really tough. And they came up with some really amazing things, including right here in Greece, of course. So how excited am I to show this slide in Athens? Very excited. So this is how things went up until about the Industrial Revolution, let's say the 19th century. And then suddenly, innovation went from being local and linear to being global and exponential. The population of the Earth shot up through the roof, largely because we had better public health, better food, and despite a couple of blips in the last century, less war. It's hard to believe sometimes, but now is actually the best time in history to ever have been alive. Fewer babies die when they're born, more people are educated, we have more women being educated and working, we have people who are just have what they need, have their needs met. And again, believe it or not, despite what you see on the news, fewer people die today in armed conflict than ever before. So we're really very fortunate, and yet we all have this anxiety about how the future is changing. Now, the good news is that because there are so many more minds working today, and so many of those minds are being connected through technology, we have this creative explosion happening right now on the Earth that's only going to continue to pick up as you guys get older and you enter the workforce, as you start your own companies, and as more and more people around the world become connected to each other. It's easy to think of technology as something that divides us, but I think of technology as the connective tissue that's bringing mankind together all across the world. So I mentioned, and Molly mentioned, you're going to hear this word exponential a lot. I heard it in the video. So let's take a minute and just unpack that, because it's an important way of thinking about the future. Because what I just showed you in that last slide is that not only is the population growing exponentially, but also innovation is growing exponentially. So here's how we tend to think about the world. We tend to think about the world linearly. It kind of makes sense. 100,000 years of human evolution has said this is basically how the world works when we look around. Over time, things tend to change at a steady rate, and what that means is tomorrow is not really that different from today, and 10 years from now is only a little bit different from today, right? But here is an exponential curve, and this is where things are changing now, because we're in an important moment of disruption where this curve starts to change. So let me walk you through what it really means to be exponential. We'll do the math in a couple of minutes, because I know you guys really want to do the math. But for now, we're just going to look at the picture. You're welcome. Okay, so at the beginning of an exponential curve, it looks like nothing is happening, right? The curve looks very, very flat at the beginning. And if you're thinking about technology or innovation or business, you are going to be super disappointed when you're at the front part of that curve, because stuff seems to be getting better less fast than it should be. Think about Siri. Do you guys remember how crappy Siri was 5 years ago? I mean, really, like, unbelievably crappy. So she still can't understand my husband very well, which is hilarious in our house. But really, Siri is much better than she was previously, right? Or what about with Gmail, with Google, where now that Google is suggesting little one-word sentences just to write your emails for you. At first, all of my emails said, "I love you, Tiffany." And I was like, this is not appropriate for a work setting. But now, these one-sentence explanations or suggestions are actually getting much better, and a lot of the time, I can just click on them. They're good enough. So what happens is a point comes where the linear and the exponential points cross. And this is when the time of maximum disruption starts happening. It's when a product or a service or a technology becomes good enough. It becomes cheap enough, it becomes fast enough, and it becomes good enough at doing what it's supposed to do that you think, yeah, okay, I will actually use Siri instead of typing it into the keyboard. And that, you can see, is now the exponential curve is really starting to take off. And then when we get on the far side of that exponential curve, that's when things start to get crazy. That's when the future, even the present, looks so much different from the past that we don't really know what to do. And we get into this area of this graph that at SU we call the chaos and wonder phase, where, like, it's amazing, it's incredible, all of these things that are happening. I'm going to show you a couple of them today. But also, it's fundamentally changing the way we live our lives, the way we think of ourselves as humans, the way we go to school, the way we go to work. All of these things are changing. And right now, I might argue that we're in a period where, if you look at politics, and I'm an American, I'll just say it, I'm an American. So I frequently feel a lot of stress looking at the world around me and looking at a lot of politics. And I think it's because people are seeing the world change and they don't know what to do about it. And so for me, when I look at the future, my job, and what I hope you'll walk out of here doing, is remembering that you are not powerless. You are on this curve as well, and this curve fundamentally empowers you, not just to make your life better, but to make the whole world a better place. And this could not be a more important time because, frankly, humanity is facing the greatest crisis we've ever faced, right? I know you all know about climate change. How many of you have been part of a climate protest? Anybody? A few. Good. I mean, I can't be clearer than this as a scientist, right? Climate change is real. It was caused by people. And because I know that, I also know that humans are able to solve this problem. You will be able to solve this problem. I will be able to solve this problem. We have to do it, and we have to do it together using technology. So this is why I work at Singularity University. Molly told you a little bit about what it means to be part of this organization. I live in Silicon Valley, so I see this stuff every single day. In fact, man, I see a lot of crazy stuff every single day. And what we do at Singularity is we say it's not just enough to use technology to make money. You have to actually make the world a better place. And so what we always challenge the businesses that we work with, the governments that we work with, the startups, even students like you guys, we say, how will you positively impact 1 billion lives? Super, super important question, and I want you to keep that in the back of your head. Because when you walk out of this session today, I want you to think to yourself, what am I going to do? How am I going to act to make the world a better place? So to prepare you to meet that challenge, let's talk about how you can think exponentially. Here's the part with the math that I promised you guys. Okay, so let's say I take a step that is 1 meter long. If I take 30 steps, how far do I go? 30 meters, right? 1, 2, 3, right? And I'm doing that in 4-inch heels. Okay, 30 meters. Now let's say I want to take 30 exponential steps. So my first step is 1 meter. My second step is 2 meters. My third step is 4, right? Every step doubles. So I get pretty rapidly up to 256, but we're still in the deceptive part of the phase, of the curve now. So somebody tell me, how far are 30 exponential steps? How many meters? Mutter, 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 mutter. Okay, let's take a look at the 29th step. At the 29th step, I will have gone 536 million meters, just in one step. So that means for that 30th step, I've gone more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 billion meters, okay? So with 30 linear steps, I go 30 meters. With 30 exponential steps, I go 26 times around the Earth. So you can see things get really big really fast at the end of an exponential curve, and that's when we're in that chaos and wonder section. But it's not just a sense of things getting bigger, it's a sense of things getting faster. So why is the world speeding up? The world feels a lot faster to me now than it did 20 years ago. And actually, it is. The future is coming at us faster than it ever has before. So here's what a computer used to look like. Computers were rooms full of people, usually women, because you could pay them less. And they were sitting there, yeah, that's right, I said it. They were sitting there doing their calculations with pencils and slide rules, and if you were really lucky, some kind of log chart, right? In the 1960s, when NASA put a man on the moon, the computers that people had were as large as cars, if not entire buildings. Now compare that to the computer that you're carrying with you in your pocket today, which is your smartphone. So computers from the 1960s to today have gone from the size of a bus to something that can fit in your pocket. Similarly, one of those computers that filled up a whole room the size of a bus cost more than $3 million back then, so let's call it 3 million euros. And a smartphone today, the newest iPhone, it's about $1,000, right? 900 euros-ish. So that is a phenomenal drop in price. And the smartphone that you have in your pocket is 120 million times faster and more powerful than the computers that put men on the moon in the 1960s. So this just tells us how easy it is to take for granted how much more power we have today. But that's just between the 1960s and today, which was the flat part of the curve. Imagine what's going to happen as we really start hitting exponential strides in computing. You guys might have seen the news recently that quantum supremacy, Google claimed they reached quantum supremacy. And then IBM was like, no, you didn't. But anyway, the scientists will get it worked out. Honestly, it's not a question of how fast the Google machine works. It's how slowly they predicted the conventional machine would work. But no matter what, the quantum machine is a big deal. And it's going to fundamentally change a lot of things, including privacy and passwords. So keep that in mind. We're just still hitting the beginning of where we're going to see these changes happen. So one way to think about the effects that this type of revolution has on the world is using a framework that at Singularity we call the 6 Ds. So everything starts when something becomes digitized. Because when information can be digitized, then it can ride on the computational advances that we're seeing that are so powerful. So the first of the 6 Ds is digitization. And then the second and third are deceptive to disruptive, so moving up that curve. We've already talked about that, so let's leave that aside. The other 3 Ds are things become dematerialized, demonetized, and democratized once they become digitized. So again, think about that smartphone in your pocket. Think about all the separate devices that people used to have, right? A calendar, and a GPS, and something to do email, and, I know this is crazy, a phone, like an actual thing that plugged into the wall. We used to have separate things for all of these, and now they all fit in a single device that costs you $1,000 and fits in your pocket. That's both dematerialization and demonetization. And the democratization, of course, means that more people have access to things because they're smaller, cheaper, faster, and better. So let's take a look at some examples of how these 6 Ds are playing out in real life. And I'm a biologist, so I'm going to be talking to you guys from my particular area of interest, which is the life sciences and health. So let's take a look at some examples. So one example of an amazing exponential advance has happened in DNA sequencing. So remember, all life on Earth is related, all life on Earth is made of cells, and the operating system that essentially runs all life on Earth is DNA. It's an open source operating system that all life on Earth uses. And so humans store information in computers as zeros and ones. Life stores information as A, C, T, and G in DNA. And it's the order or the sequence of those A's, C's, T's, and G's that encode the information of life. So in order to figure out what the order of those DNA bases is, the A's, C's, T's, and G's, there have been technologies that are called DNA sequencing technologies. And you might remember in 2001, a draft version of the human genome sequence was published for the first time. So you have about 3 billion A's, C's, T's, and G's in your DNA, and the order is what matters. And every human being on Earth is 99.9% identical at the DNA level to every other human being on Earth. So that's your California hippie moment for the day. I'm going to say it one more time because it helps me get out of bed in the morning. Every human being on Earth is 99.9% identical to every other human being. So all these reasons we kill each other, we make that up. It's not hard-coded in us. So there you go. You're welcome. So I'm telling you, man, it helps me a lot. So in 2001, when that first draft human genome was sequenced, it cost more than $3 billion US, which you can buy a really fancy fighter plane with. Then what you can see, note the log scale on the y-axis, please. So when you plot an exponential curve on a logarithmic scale, you get a straight line. So that's what we're seeing there. That straight line is the logarithmic curve. So after 2001, between 2001 and 2008, the price performance of reading out DNA effectively followed an exponential curve until 2008 when a new technology was invented that uses different computers and different chemistry. That technology was given the name next generation sequencing. We're actually on to the 3rd version now. Do you guys want to guess what it's called? Next generation sequencing. Think carefully when you name something, friends, because names matter. So what you can see is that after 2008, DNA sequencing began radically outperforming Moore's law, down to the point where in 2015, it cost $1,000 US to sequence a human genome. So to put that in perspective, it's 900 euros. So from 3 billion to 900. That was the change in how much it costs to do this. So for 900 euros, you can get 2 tickets to a Taylor Swift concert. You can get a really, really fancy haptic VR rig for about 900 euros. And in fact, it's gotten so cheap today that if you want to have just the part of your DNA that does something, so that's called your exome, that costs as much money as your Spotify account for the year. That's it. So this is a radically different world. And in fact, a couple of us think that within 2 to 5 years, it will be essentially free to get your genome read out. How many of you have ever done that? Has anybody had their genome sequenced or done like a 23andMe kit? Folks in the front, excellent. Okay, play with the tech, it's really important. Let me show you an example of this dematerialization. So in 2001, when the human genome was sequenced, it was sequenced mostly in Boston, in Massachusetts, in these giant warehouses with no windows that were stuffed full of machines, all of which were about the size of a refrigerator. That's what a DNA sequencer looked like in 2001. Each of those machines cost about 900,000 euros, for which you can get like a really cool McLaren or a Bugatti or a really nice diamond watch if you're into that kind of thing, right? So $1 million, 900,000 euros. And for 50 of those machines, because remember I just told you the buildings were full of them, if I buy 50 of those machines, 45 million euros will get you to the space station. So that's how much money we're talking about. Now let me show you. We still have some big machines like that today, but this is what a DNA sequencer can look like today. I am showing you a DNA sequencer made by a company called Oxford Nanopore in the UK. It is a handheld DNA sequencer that plugs into a laptop by USB. There's a new version of this which is called the Smidge Ion, which connects to your smartphone. So this is very, very different. And this device costs 900 euros. Again, we're back to that Taylor Swift concert or that fancy VR rig. So imagine a future in which every classroom, every farmer, every hospital, every doctor, every nurse, everyone out in the community has access to real-time information about a disease or of something they're eating. Any of these things are accessible now because we've dematerialized and demonetized. Here's an example. These are some folks in Brazil called the Zebra Project who took some of those handheld DNA sequencers I told you about, got somebody to give them an old bus, you can see it in the picture here, and they drove around Brazil diagnosing Zika in mothers and children and finding mosquitoes, and then mapping the DNA to the geographical area so they could see how Zika was spreading. This was a bunch of college students. This wasn't crazy, cutting-edge research scientists who have $1 billion to play with. This was a bunch of students in a van. And I love this tweet that they tweeted out from the project, where they say something like, we worked 14 hours a day, but could generate high-quality whole genomes in days. Fun, fun, fun. Yeah, actually, it is fun, fun, fun. And it's amazing that this technology is this accessible. So imagine what you could do. So that's just in my really tight area of interest. Let me show you a couple of other cool examples from folks who are here, actually here today in the building. So my friend and colleague, James Ehrlich, he lives near me in Palo Alto in Silicon Valley. He is working to build villages that are entirely self-sufficient and are closed ecosystems. They make their own energy, they purify their own water, they grow their own food, and they have effectively no footprint on the earth around them. That's really amazing. He's working to build these here in Europe, and he's built them in a couple other places in the world. So imagine instead of Athens getting bigger, what you had were decentralized villages, all of which were completely self-sustaining. That's what James is working towards. Here's another example of a technology that's really exciting. Imagine a world, and this one's actually a little scary, in which there aren't any more human farmers. That farming is either done vertically in buildings or in warehouses or even in shipping containers that you can move everywhere. So you don't have to be connected to the land, and instead of humans doing the terribly hard work of being a farmer, you've got robots doing it very cheerfully. We're seeing a lot. I just said robots had emotions. We can come back to that later. So this isn't science fiction. This is happening today, and it's not just something that's happening in California. I was down in Miami last April with some high school students, and I was working with them with their farm bot that they are building at their school using an app on their phones in order to tell the robot how to do the farming and to keep the vegetables growing for their school's cafeteria. We also have in a building today two colleagues of mine, Mark Post and Lowry Reuter, who are working to make sure that no animal ever will die again, but you still get to eat a burger. So this is not science fiction, this is happening now. Mark Post has already done this. We can take cells from an animal, grow them in a lab, and then you can have the meat that you want, and no animal has to die for it, and the environmental impact of having beef and pork and chickens and all these things starts to go to zero because we're not killing the animals anymore. The young woman that I'm showing you here is working in the laboratory growing tuna. So they're making tuna in the lab because the last tuna fish will be taken out of the oceans in my lifetime, let alone your lifetime. So imagine again the oceans being able to be sustained because we're no longer eating fish that come from the ocean. Yes, I ate fish for dinner last night, and I had octopus, and it was delicious. But I would feel even better knowing that the oceans were safe and that I was getting the same great tasting food from the laboratory. Let's think about, so we've already talked about future farming, future fishing. Let's talk about the future of being a doctor. How many of you guys think you're going to be a doctor or a nurse when you grow up? Okay, wait for it. So this group in Stanford, a couple of years ago, decided that they were going to see if they could train an AI to be as good at diagnosing skin cancer as human doctors. So what they did was they took about 130,000 images of skin cancer, and then for each of those 130,000, they also had the pathology report and the diagnosis. So they knew what humans thought about whether that particular skin lesion was cancerous. And then what they did was they trained a neural net on all of those things in order to get a machine learning that would be able to diagnose cancer based just on a snapshot. And then what they did was they fed a whole bunch of new images that the neural net had never seen before, a whole bunch of new images of skin lesions, and asked the neural net whether it was cancerous or not. So I don't know if you guys watch Silicon Valley. You remember hot dog, no hot dog? Same idea, but cancer. And what they found was that the AI they had trained was as good as human board-certified pathologists in diagnosing cancer. Now, to help figure out, what's the baseline of that, actually, any single human doctor is as good at diagnosing cancer as a flock of pigeons. I know. It turns out pigeons have amazing pattern recognition capability, and if you crowdsource pigeon cancer diagnostics, they're as good as a human diagnostic. That's a real scientific paper. I didn't believe it either. I had to read it. So imagine a future in which instead of going to the pathologist or to the dermatologist in order to find out whether your mole is cancerous, there's an app for that, and you just take a picture. Now what that tells me, folks who think they're going to medical school, don't be a pathologist. Other fields like radiology, right? Reading an x-ray, reading a sonogram. I had a mammogram the other day, and the technician and I were looking at the image, and she said, okay, your results will be back in a week. And I said, are those results going to be read by a human? And she goes, oh yeah, don't worry. And I was like, wrong answer, lady. I would much rather have the computer doing my diagnostic. But do you think I would want to hear from a computer that I had cancer? No. We still want to hear that news and to have the empathy and the kindness and the hope from other humans. So I actually think of this as a superpower from doctors and nurses, because instead of doing all of these repetitive tasks that are better done by an AI, a doctor and a nurse will be empowered to actually be spending time with people and healing, which is what the medical profession is supposed to be about. And the last thing I want to leave you with is this image that was created by an AI at Google, which was told to create art. So this algorithm looked at basically the collective bunch of human art, and then when it decided to make its own picture, this is what it made. Do you guys like this? No, I find this deeply disturbing. It's like super creepy. I would never put it in my house. But here's the point I'm trying to make. AI, and you're going to hear more about AI from my amazing colleague Anita in just a minute, is a phenomenal tool that is going to make us, give us effectively superpowers as humans. But we still get to decide, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be an artist? What does it mean to be a doctor? What does it mean to be a kind and empathetic person? We don't have algorithms to tell us those things, and I don't think we're going to have them anytime soon. It's just like in school, right? We talk about, what am I teaching my son to prepare him for this future that we're talking about? Well, I said coding, that's true, but coding will give us this. The other thing that my son learns every single day in his school, he's at a fancy Silicon Valley school, is empathy. Instead of spending time in school learning about facts, which frankly, at this point, you could do to a large extent online, in school, they're learning how to be kind to each other, how to treat boys and girls the same, how to work with people who have difficulties, and how to put themselves in the role of another person to understand their lives. Because that's how we make the world a better place. We make the world a better place by being better people, and luckily today, we have technology to help us do that. But that means making choices, friends. It means making choices every single day, beginning today. So that's where I want to leave this. Here's my call to action for you. What do you do now? The first thing is keep learning. I can't emphasize this enough. Learning does not only happen in the classroom. The most important learning you'll do in your life happens outside the classroom. And don't think that when you finish high school or you finish college that you're done learning. Because as we can see, as things change more and more and more, it's going to be more important for humans to be lifelong learners. Because every time there's a new challenge, there's also a new opportunity. So keep learning. Don't ever stop learning. Play with the tech. I can stand up here and talk to you guys all day about this stuff, but unless you actually go and touch it with your hands, did you guys see the surgical robot upstairs? The Da Vinci surgical robot? It's amazing. The first time I played with one of those, it was like every happy receptor in my brain fired at the same time because nerd. But you have an opportunity to play with a lot of these technologies. They're not hidden, they're not secret, they are out there, they are open, they are available. And a great place that you can go to play with these technologies is a makerspace. So I actually looked it up, and you have 2 makerspaces here in downtown Athens. Regrettably, I was not able to find a bio makerspace here. There are actually places where you can go and play with biotech. There's some of them in Europe, none in Greece, unfortunately. But if you want to talk to me about starting one, we can have that conversation. Because again, when you become fluent with the technology, you're empowered to unleash your creativity with it. I also want to encourage you to find your tribe. It's really, really easy to look around today and find people who are scared and pessimistic and angry and don't know what to do. I strongly advise you to surround yourself with a different kind of people. With the people who think that the future is hopeful, that there's something you can do about it, who don't think it's crazy for an 18-year-old to start a company and to raise funding and to, hey, maybe be a millionaire in a couple of years. It's not on average not what happens, spoiler alert, but it's not impossible, it happens. So find your tribe. And one place that you can look is at the Singularity U Athens chapter. So that is a group of folks, all of who live in Athens and in the surrounding areas, who get together on a regular basis to talk about technology, to talk about what they're working on, and to talk about what they're doing to make the world a better place. And then finally, I challenge you to change the world. You can do this. We can all do it. We can do it together, and we can do it following our own visions. And that is why I think you're here today, so that you can make your future. So thank you all very much. I really want to know what you think about the future and what you're planning to do about it. So I've got a little QR code here that's got a little survey. I want to hear your voices, so please contact me, fill out the survey, share your thoughts, and together we will find ways to make a better future. Thank you very much.